I'd like to point out to somebody, this book was, it's called Gimme Refuge, Education of a Caretaker, and it's set on the Nestucca Bay National Wildlife Refuge between Pacific City and Nestucca. I was the caretaker there for 10 years, and it is the finest thing I will ever do in my life, no doubt about it. Turn this away. I moved to the coast in 1997. I was teaching at Holbrook High School. I was dead to the world. I wanted to be a writer. I hadn't written a word. There were a lot of distractions in Portland in that era. It was really cheap to live. I lived in the Pearl. And it wasn't happening for me. I got caught in traffic, answered an ad to teach the coast. It was going to be a one-year cultural experiment. I just got married to Cindy at the time. We were intended to stay there 1 year. I'm going on my 14th year now. And I taught at a middle school down there. One day, a wildlife manager named Eric Nelson called me on the phone. How would you like to be caretaker of a national wildlife refuge? I didn't even know what it was. It was the biggest break of my entire life. And I went up there, 600 acres, lord and protector of the Nestucca Bay National Wildlife Refuge. And on that refuge, I got myself together because there was no one around. And I hacked a lot of blackberries. And you can do a lot of internal thinking in the blackberry. So the book is set during the first year I taught at the middle school and simultaneously becoming the caretaker of the wildlife refuge. I would teach my ass off to these middle school kids, which was a whole different thing. And then I would come home and start hacking blackberries till dusk. And I loved it. Can we turn this off?
Yeah, the white button.
All right.
Oh, you got it there. All right, cool.
And at the time, I was married to Cindy, who is the illustrator in the book. And she's here tonight. And I would like, are you here?
Yeah.
Okay. She's in the back. She did these fine illustrations of the book, so I wanted to point her out tonight. If you buy the book, make sure you get her to sign it as well, because they're very intimate in illustrations of our life together up there. But when I'm going to read you a little riff here from the book about National Poetry Month. Okay? So some of you guys remember the poetry slams we used to have. And at this point, it's getting towards April. I'm 35 years old. The idea here is to finish this teaching year, and then I am done forever. I'm never going back. So sold that loft in the Pearl in 3 minutes, put the money in the bank. I lived there for free. Cindy and I lived there for free. I bartered my labor for rent. I was set. It was the break. It was like a huge federal subsidy to write. Okay? But first I had to get through the teaching year. So this is National Poetry Month. Once again, I'll dedicate it to the teachers. With my best teaching material and full creative energy ready to be unleashed, my scheduled 3-week poetry unit begins. We read poems, write poems, memorize poems, randomly construct poems like the Surrealists did, study different forms, techniques, and listen to Jack Kerouac perform his crazy, cool American haikus. After reading an Emily Dickinson biography and learning that she called her poetry snow, I suggest the students name their poetry. Hearing this, they look at me like I'm stupid. And when I suggest they loaf and invite their soul, on a weekend, one of the girls asks if she can do that watching a video. My material bombs. Explosions resound throughout the room, but only I can hear them. Suddenly, students insist on rhyming every poem. They're bored listening to Kerouac. They have trouble grasping the concept of metaphor. When I ask each student to choose a poem from a collection of nearly 50 books in the library that best captures a mood they've recently experienced and read it aloud, some of the girls recite Mother Hubbard. Some girls write on a single subject, their pets. One boy projectile vomits in the classroom during one of my dramatic readings. He claims he has the flu and I have to clean it up. Rapidly I sense nothing of educational personal value is happening with this unit. Assuredly the opposite when I taught poetry at the high school level. My sophomores, juniors, and seniors poured it out and poured it on. Love, fear, loss, death, angst, hate, pain, lust, losing, and very bad sex. One afternoon during a lesson investigating the poetic value of popular music, I played David Bowie's Heroes and asked, what do you think he's after when he sings We Can Be Heroes for Just One Day? Nobody says a word. And I wait, and I wait, and I wait, staked out naked on an anthill. What happens next is a first in my teaching career. I abruptly suspend a lesson in progress because it's tanking so badly, and I'm a teacher in the throes of professional disintegration. I cannot continue even though I have 30 minutes to fill and many more carefully selected pop songs to play, including some of the girls' pussy boy band favorites. It doesn't matter. I'm whipped here. The ship of poetic state hath sunk, and this captain honors maritime tradition. You know, I say, I'm going to stop now, and we're going to move on to something else. No explanation, no excuses, no tirades. Lucky for me, 7th and 8th graders are totally oblivious to a visceral teaching shipwreck in their midst. And they transition smoothly into our next activity, recess. While I collapse into an easy chair. It's now 4th and 35 from my own 10-yard line, the second quarter of a 0-0 football game for the World Championship of Teaching Poetry. But I won't punt. I don't know how to punt when it comes to poetry. But I have 20 minutes until the students return from recess to invent a new gadget play. They take their seats and I announce Poetry Madness. A hike tomorrow, rain or shine, gale force winds. We shall hike a 5-mile round journey of Keatsian proportions down Nestucca Spit to the jaws of the river, to the roiling bar of Nestucca Bay where bald eagles soar, to become poets ourselves, bards of yore, the unacknowledged legislators of the world. Raw nature will seize us by the throats and strangle the verse forth. We'll be mad to be in contact with it, as Whitman wrote, and I'll quote that line before we begin our march down the sand. If these kids aren't inspired to embrace poetry after this experience, then literate American civilization is doomed and the combine prevails. The students seem mildly interested in my ideal. And well, if it means missing class, then shit, man. We love poetry. I have to tell you, I'm going to do a completely different performance. I teach at Newport High School, and we had a faculty meeting today, and it was the most dispiriting event of my 21 years in education. It is brutal out there. I've got class sizes of 42, 43. They dropped the band program at Newport High School. There's no art. We are in a state. I'm not going to get on my high horse here, but it ties into Refuge. This is a book basically about becoming a caretaker of a wildlife refuge, which is the biggest break of my entire life that came about through my teaching career. But the book is really about teaching. It's a little bit about blackberries too, because there's a lot of cutting of blackberries up there. But it's about my love-hate relationship with the profession and how both my parents were teachers, and I thought it was beneath me. I had not eclipsed my parents. They were master teachers, and I sort of, wandered in my career, and then found my way back through the refuge, and then coming back into teaching after I had written some books. I felt I was teaching writing. I was one of those teachers, the biology teacher that doesn't teach evolution, the sex teacher that doesn't have sex. The health teacher that weighs 350 pounds, the American government teacher that doesn't vote, those kinds of people. I was the writing teacher that didn't write. Before we start, I'm gonna dedicate this piece to all the teachers in the room. Okay, this is called "On the Destruction of a Cell Phone." This is not in the book. And there is an eyewitness to this event. Where is she? Haley, raise your hand. Okay, so I'm not making this up. May I recount a story of unbridled joy for your reading pleasure? Telling it makes me so happy, it makes me want to do a little jig. You like seeing depressed writers happy, right? Last year, I smashed a student's cell phone to smithereens in class at Newport High School where I teach, and it felt very good. I also broke my favorite stool at the same time, but that was an acceptable price to pay. My seniors had finished reading Siddhartha, and if ever humans created the perfectly evil antithesis to the perfectly simple, slow, and attentive vibe this novel has to offer, it is the cell phone. Is anyone really present with it anymore, or concentrating? With 5 minutes to go in a second period, I asked the class if someone felt addicted to their phone. They absolutely knew they never lived in the moment because of it, and this machine easily facilitated lie after lie after lie. Those that weren't actually using a phone while I remonstrated appeared shocked and dismayed. A few seconds later, a senior boy wordlessly offered his phone to me. I set the phone on a stool and turned down the lights. I turned on 2 spotlights and they shot a narrow beam of light to the stool. I told everyone to turn on their obnoxious ringtones to maximum. Louder! Let them glow. Hold them aloft. I want to hear Satan's auto-tune Spawn. I mean, Justin Bieber sing. Then I took out a rusty hand sledgehammer hidden in the bookshelf behind me and raised it above my shoulders. A few students raised panicked objections, but I didn't listen. I brought the hammer down mightily with a Buddhist serenity that Siddhartha would have extolled. I smote mine enemy. It shattered into flying silver pieces. I sent it to a landfill where one day, eons from now, it will return to Earth as semi-precious metals and taint some community's water supply to form babies. The hammer also splintered the stool, and that greatly saddened me. It has served me well over the years. I wrote many fine sentences about Oregon on its lacquered pine seat, a noble stool. The destruction was complete. The boy cried, metaphor planted, bell rang, class dismissed. I want to read a section here. It's very personal to me, but I want to read it because I've done it. I've gone an unconventional way. And whenever I've tried to do something conventionally in my life, it has never worked. That includes looking for a job, a relationship, hacking blackberries, and discovering who I was as an Oregon writer. So I'm going to read a little riff here and then take some questions. So this is the very end here. A few weeks after I ended my teaching career at Nestucca Valley School, I began an intense writing apprenticeship entirely of my own design, not really knowing where it would lead. I just knew I had to write and get it in print. Over the next 3 years, I wrote hundreds of articles, columns, and reviews for about a dozen local and regional publications. They barely paid anything, but it was a start. I even put a rigorous 2-year hitch as a sports writer for Tillamook's newspaper covering high school athletic contests and writing up 3, sometimes 4, 600 stories every weekend. During my apprenticeship, I wrote on a wide variety of topics, but I found I most enjoyed reporting lost or forgotten Oregon stories from the 1960s and 70s. Virtually no other writer in the state was mining this rich territory. It was here I found my literary voice, a distinct one for Oregon, I believe, or I hope. I finished a vastly different version of Gimme Refuge in 2001 and sent it to approximately 30 agents and publishers. One day, I received the following letter, and I excerpt it here. Dear Matt, I promised that I would get through your manuscript this weekend, and I did. I thoroughly enjoyed reading it. It's interesting and compelling and solidly written for the most part. You've definitely improved it over the first version I saw. Still, having said all that, I just don't know how saleable this is. What would you say your target audience is? Environmentalists? Burned out teachers? Just not sure. Especially since the ending is so uncertain. I had sent this book to this agent before I had left the refuge. Okay? It seems premature, as if this is a book that you should write after you've succeeded or failed at something other than teaching. I'm going to pass on taking this on. On a personal note, this is a hard thing to write. While the book is engaging and solidly written, I don't see it as a work of high literary merit. I don't think you're going to be a truly great writer, although you're a good writer. What I did see throughout the manuscript was a truly great teacher. The type that I hope my children will have in middle school. Obviously, you have to do what you have to do, and I think it's a damn shame that you're no longer in the classroom. Just my opinion. I do wish you the best of luck with the book and the refuge and your future writing and figuring out what you should really be doing. Part of Mose.
Okay.
And he's 46 years old there, summer of 1970. He's filming Ken Kesey's Sometimes a Great Notion. That's the book I'm working on. I'm trying to find out if Paul Newman actually walked into a bar in Toledo one night and cut the legs off the pool table and then walked out and then didn't say anything. There's a rumor out in Lincoln County. So the new book is going to come out. I don't know when it's going to come out, but I'm about a third of the way done with it, and I really love what's happening. Imagine if Brad Pitt and Angie and all their kids came and stayed at Salishan for one summer with no entourage, just themselves, and drove themselves around and interacted with all these people. And you had Henry Fonda, Richard Jekyll, Michael Sarrazin, and they had extraordinary access to the locals. The book is about the locals. A couple of illegitimate children came out of this production. Some good partying, and a mediocre film, in my opinion. So that's coming later.